Welcome to the Dumpster Dive. I'm your host, Digby the Cat, because in a world as fake and gay as ours, you may as well get your news from a talking cartoon cat in a dumpster. Tonight, our main story is, of course, the Iran War. Everyone's favorite current sequel to the Gulf Wars. We're up to what? Gulf War 3 now? Gulf War 4? 5? Who knows? Who cares? It's another Gulf War. As you can see from this lovely map provided to us by S2 Underground, the conflict is continuing as expected. Large quantities of attacks on Iran itself, with a couple of regions taking the lion's share, Tehran especially taking the lion's share of the attacks. Here we have a rough guide. Each of these little dots here representing a strike. Yes, all these representing strikes. So we got various ones here. We got a bunch over here in Tabriz as well. What are they hitting in Tabriz? It doesn't say. In response, the Iranians have, of course, continued their strikes on surrounding regions. We have multiple strikes in Kuwait. We have strikes all throughout Bahrain and Qatar. The UAE also are taking multiple strikes throughout Dubai and various oil infrastructure. Iranian attacks seem to be prioritizing radar infrastructure, oil infrastructure, and, of course, any ships that are silly enough to attempt to try and get through the Strait of Hormuz. We have multiple images from here. Oh, that's not the one I was looking for. Here we have some footage of an a coalition interceptor slamming into an Iranian drone. Quite dramatic. This is a shoot down of an Iranian drone somewhere over Iraq. Yes, Erbil, Iraq. We also have footage of Iranian drones attacking oil infrastructure. As we said earlier, they are continuing to attack the oil infrastructure. In this case, this was a strike earlier today at the Mina petroleum facility on the port of Salal in Oman. Also, 2 oil tankers have been struck by Iran in the northern Persian Gulf, both reportedly loaded with Iraqi oil, as it says here, and the tankers are completely fucked. Another strike was on the Mayarinari Bangkok. I'm assuming it's from Bangkok. The vessel had to be abandoned. We have had multiple hits on vessels that have been trying to get through the strait. Reportedly, many of these vessels are spoofing their location on GPS so that they are harder to detect, and others are claiming to be Chinese in an attempt to get through. How well this is working is open to debate. We don't really have reliable figures for how many are getting through, how many are still in the area, and how many have been hit. But so far, we are looking at around 3 getting hit in the strait itself, and others being hit nearby. So clearly not going well. There are also reports that the Iranians are beginning to mine the area. Do I have pictures of that? I do not. There are reports that the Iranians are beginning to deploy sea mines in the area, with the USA striking multiple multiple boats that were deploying sea mines. Initially, the USA claimed that the Iranians were not laying sea mines, but if they were, they should definitely take them up immediately. They have now transitioned that to, yes, they are laying mines, and we are blowing up the boats. In response, oil prices have predictably spiked massively, with multiple nations instigating measures to try and mitigate the damage. Perhaps the biggest one is the International Energy Agency has begun to coordinate the release of 400 million barrels of oil from the strategic reserves of various nations that are member states of the IEA. This is mainly in an attempt to try and get oil prices to a more reasonable level, and as we have seen, it has somewhat worked. However, this is not a long-term fix, as obviously these strategic reserves can run out. That is important to remember. And on another much sadder front, for fans of the F-14 Tomcat, hoping against hope that somehow the poor, poor orphaned F-14s in Iran would somehow survive the war, they're not going to survive the war. Unfortunately for us all, F-14 Tomcats are being targeted and they are being destroyed. Very sad. These poor, poor relics. F in chat for the F-14. American strikes continue, obviously, and they are proving quite effective. They are targeting any ballistic missiles, any drones they can find, and they are hitting their targets and they are getting kills. The question is, however, how much is this going to degrade the overall capabilities of the Iranian state? Insofar, not as much as they might like. Insofar, perhaps not as much as they might like. We are seeing strikes pretty much everywhere throughout the region. And even beyond, with strikes happening all the way in Cyprus, in the Mediterranean. So the Iranians are clearly still able to do quite a bit of damage. How long the Americans will be able to keep up the tempo of their operations with the extreme cost of their interceptors versus the cost of Iranian drones is anyone's guess. The war is reportedly costing a rather obscene amount of money every day. I've heard figures from hundreds of millions to billions being thrown around. How much exactly it is going to cost is anyone's guess. Suffice it to say, however, the losses on the American side have been extremely expensive rather than body-wise. Whilst losses are at the moment approximately anywhere from 6 to 10, depending on who you ask. Of course, Iranians are claiming over 700 Americans dead, but I don't think we can trust the Iranians on that one. The American side of things has resulted in a loss of very expensive military infrastructure being destroyed. Perhaps most dramatically, the American THAAD launchers. With the radar system for a number of the THAAD launches being destroyed. Hang on a second, I should have had this picture up there beforehand. No, I don't want AI mode. Not exactly a particularly great image, but it does get the point across. The radar system for one of the THAAD launches was destroyed, and others have been damaged. These are 500 million US dollar radar pieces of radar equipment, with approximately 10 to 12 being in existence. That number is in decline. There have been reports that THAAD launcher systems from South Korea are being redeployed to the Middle East, much to the consternation of the South Korean government, who are a little concerned of such critical military infrastructure being removed from their region. Overall, in this cat's view, the American side of the conflict, they are winning, but it is a very expensive victory. Not in terms of lives, but in finances and overall economic damage. Obviously, oil has jumped above $100 a barrel before diving back down due to the IEA's intervention. The overall cost is going to be catastrophic. The debts will be the debt will be a shackle that will drag the US economy down a fair bit over the coming decades. And it is debatable if the USA will see a benefit that matches the price being paid. Whilst obviously a lot of this equipment is not strictly owned by the USA, the THAAD launcher system in question was paid for by the Saudi government. So they will probably be able to get some of that back through the Saudis or other regional allies. However, the cost to benefit ratio on the interceptor systems that they are using is not very good. In fact, it's quite bad. These interceptor systems are extremely expensive to operate, with each missile, in some cases, costing hundreds of thousands to even millions of dollars. Obviously, using a $100,000 missile to shoot down a $50,000 drone, and then again, 50,000 is probably quite the overestimation on the cost. It's not a winning proposition. And it's a question of how long can you keep it up? Even if your bank book can meet the demand, can your manufacturing capacity? Last week, US President Donald Trump dragged members of the Raytheon board to the White House, basically to admonish them for failing to meet the production targets he was setting. To give an idea of what kind of production targets were already in place, the Navy was budgeted for approximately 97 Patriot missiles last year. They've used that probably in about a couple of hours in this recent conflict. So, the overall situation, the USA is on the offensive. The USA is definitely in a demanding and powerful position, but it is debatable how long they can keep that up. Overall, the disposition of US forces, the Gerald Ford Carrier Strike Group seems to be sat in the Mediterranean, coordinating strikes from that direction, whilst the Abraham Lincoln is in the Arabian Sea, outside the Strait of Hormuz, coordinating its strikes from that direction. And as we can see, we have a rough map of the Israeli and American strikes. Rough map, not as good as the S2 underground one. But as you can see, the Gerald Ford strike group seems to be moving through the Suez Canal and has been moving over the last few days. They are likely still transiting the Red Sea. It is unclear what exactly they're going to be doing there. In all probability, they will be trying to set themselves up in the Strait of Hormuz to provide cover for the vessels that are currently trapped in the Persian Gulf. President Trump did encourage ships to try and run the strait, possibly hoping that if enough made the run, the Iranians would not be able to get them all or damage any of them terribly. They don't seem to have gone for that option. With the cancellation of many ships' insurance, they are now facing the question of they are now facing the prospect of extreme financial losses in the event of any kind of damage to their ship. As a consequence, they seem to have been content to stay in port where there are at least missile defenses that might provide them with some protection. Whilst those who have tried the gauntlet, obviously, as we mentioned earlier, not doing so well. No doubt many have gotten through, but others have not. And, well, if you own a multi-million-dollar ship that you still owe money on, what are you going to do? Try to run the gauntlet? Or stay under the protection of missile intercept systems? I know what I would do. I would probably just sit there and wait. Of course, President Trump has insisted that the USA will stand in as an insurer for these ships, the US government, that is. However, there has been no relevant act of Congress or any kind of official announcement outside of a post on Truth Social, so it is debatable if that is legally binding or if anyone has tried to claim on this yet. I, for one, would be very interested in knowing, but I couldn't find any information on the matter. As said earlier, for now, the tempo seems to be favoring the USA. Meanwhile, the Iranian plan is to endure until the Americans can continue no longer. It calls to mind the British strategy during World War II for the Battle of Britain, where the Germans could only really launch an invasion of Britain by sea, obviously. But to do so, they would need control of the skies, so that the Kriegsmarine could take on the Royal Navy with a chance of winning. To do that, they of course needed complete air dominance, which meant no RAF. And so the bombing runs over Britain were not just about damaging industrial infrastructure, but also about depleting the RAF and its capabilities. Obviously, the British only needed to keep showing up. Each day, the RAF responded to German bombers was another day that the Germans could not launch their invasion. The Iranians seem to be taking a similar posture. So long as they can keep launching missiles or drones, they are sort of winning. Will that hold out? Who knows? Who knows? The war is in its early stages. Boots on the ground are now expected. We'll see what happens. But moving on to other news. Valve Corporation is being sued once again. Again. Shocking, isn't it? Numerous cases in recent years. Oh, that's not the one. This time they're being sued over by the UK Performing Rights Society, the PRS. They have commenced legal proceedings against Valve over the use of music in PC games being sold and distributed via Steam. The PRS is claiming that Valve never attained a license for its use of the rights managed by PRS on behalf of its various members. Obviously, on the surface, this seems absolutely absurd, as this is a problem for the game's developers, not distributors. Of course, this is not the position the PRS are taking, and they are taking their attempt. This follows on the back of another case in the UK against Valve for a collective action lawsuit over alleged anti-competitive prices on their PC storefront. Everyone knows it. Steam. Everyone loves it. Steam. Praise Gaben. And of course, in New York, they're also suing Valve. A lot of people are suing Valve lately. It seems a bit odd, and they're all targeting Valve and leaving other companies alone. Strange, this, isn't it? Strange. All of a sudden, I wonder why this is. It couldn't possibly have anything to do with the fact that Gabe and Valve recently defeated a member of the Rothschild family in court. For those of you who don't know that particular case, the details are... I'll give you a rough layout of the details. Essentially, Valve was hassled many years ago by a member of the Rothschild family who runs a patent troll outfit. He purchases patents for promising technology, and then he sues companies who develop something similar and demands licensing fees. Obviously, patent trolls are generally looked down upon by many, but they are an unfortunate reality of the patent system. You can't really get rid of them. Of course, Mr. Rothschild, this Rothschild in question, Lee Rothschild, likes to style himself as an inventor, but the reality is he doesn't invent things, he just buys them. So, they sued Valve many years ago, and Valve acquired a perpetual license at considerable expense to all patents owned by Lee Rothschild and his various subsidiaries. A perpetual license. Lee Rothschild and his companies decided at a later date that they would sue Valve again, claiming, but you didn't buy every patent or something. Then they lost that case. Well, they backed off on the first one, as I understand. They backed off on the first attempt, and then the second attempt, they went all in. Yes, here we are. Display Technologies sued Valve for infringement, and then in 2023, they did it again. And Valve decided enough was enough and responded with their own lawsuit. And Valve's strategy was quite impressive. They went not just after the one company that was suing them, because obviously these companies can be disbanded on a whim and their assets moved to another one. They instead targeted Lee Rothschild directly, along with all his various shell companies. And they won. The jury sided with Valve and declared Lee Rothschild a patent troll. Now, that's the important thing. That is the important thing. because strictly speaking, that now makes the Rothschild's entire grift technically illegal, or at least severely limits his ability to defend himself against such accusations in the future from other potential lawsuits. Obviously, this does not work very well for Mr. Rothschild, and the Rothschild family does remain very well connected. So it does seem a little odd that just as soon as Valve completely curb stomps Lee Rothschild in court, everyone's trying to sue Valve all at once. It's very, very convenient. But of course, Gabe Newell is Gabe Newell. Do nothing, win. Do something, win even harder. Overall, it's looking like Valve will be able to contest these various lawsuits and win. Their legal budget is basically yes. So hopefully, Valve will come out of this the other side completely intact. There was also a case brought up recently where the New York state government is not happy with Valve in regards to CSGO loot boxes. Valve's position is that they viewed the contents of loot boxes as being similar to trading cards. Rather, whilst the New York state government wants them to be non-transferable. Obviously, these two philosophies clash quite directly, and Valve's position is simple. It's better for consumers if they are transferable. Fuck you. We'll comply if you make us, but you gotta pass a law for that. A reasonable position. I sincerely hope that Valve steps in and does something on that front, but we will see what happens in the long run. Suffice it to say, the situation for Valve is that they are beset upon on all fronts. Multiple state bodies are suing them, industry bodies are suing them, competitors are suing them, and of course, the DRAM crisis. The RAM crisis continues to fuck up the launch of the Steam machine and the Steam frame and the Steam controller, despite it likely not using any RAM. Or if it does, it uses very little. I want my Steam controller. I want my Steam frame. I want my Steam machine. Oh, Gabe. Save us. And over to the UK again. The UK, yes, the UK, where Keir Starmer manages to continue to prove that he is a complete and useless Wallach. The UK government continues its push for ID verification on various platforms. There's not really much new on that one, but I felt it worth mentioning that they're not really changing their minds. And I saw this image, and I thought it was funny, and I like it. When are you going to make a decision? Never. What are you going to do? Nothing. Who are you going to inspire? No one. Keir Starmer in a nutshell. But on a more general news, in regards to open source software, yeah, we do cover a very eclectic mix of topics on the dumpster dive. It's a dumpster. You'd be surprised what I find in here. Midnight BSD bans users in Brazil and California and warns that more regions will follow. I know they say could, but no, they will. Multiple state bodies throughout the USA are pushing for age verification at the operating system level. Now, this is a problem. There are two variations of this floating around, but fundamentally the outcome is the same. Operating systems will be expected to age verify users at account creation. Obviously, this doesn't really work for everyone. This doesn't work for open source operating systems. This wouldn't work for Linux. It doesn't work for BSD. It doesn't work for calculator operating systems. There are a large number of operating systems this simply wouldn't work for. I imagine Microsoft are all over this, but that's Microsoft. Nobody cares about Microsoft. And obviously, the open source community is not very happy. They are not very happy at all. A number of BSD distributions have simply added a term to their licensing, stating that users in California and other such areas where these laws apply cannot use the software. Or if they do, they are using it illegally. This is kind of funny, purely on the basis that BSD stands for Berkeley Standard Distribution. Berkeley, in California. Can't use it in the state it was made in. How terrible. Obviously, the Linux ecosystem is overall unhappy, but some distributions are planning to comply. Ubuntu is perhaps the most famous of the ones planning compliance, although the project has yet to firmly state whether it will comply. There are discussions being made by their engineers publicly about the possibility of compliance and how they would comply. This is not terribly surprising, as Canonical is a very corporate distribution. They are very much a business-focused crowd, so it's not terribly surprising. The Fedora community is also exploring a non-intrusive implementation, which is again unsurprising, as Fedora is Red Hat, and Red Hat is focused heavily around the corporate environment, selling Red Hat Enterprise Linux, which is just rebranded Fedora, to various business customers and providing support. Obviously, for them, compliance is a foregone conclusion. But how will they make it work? Who knows? Other distros, meanwhile, are saying, fuck you. The bold step, yes, bold step is a good way of saying this, from Omachi Linux has been that they have no plans to respond to the retarded California law, and I quote there, retarded. Adenix Linux have also declared that they will not do any kind of age checks, because they just don't like that idea. Obviously, as we mentioned earlier, a number of BSD distributions have said, with Midnight BSD taking the front charge on this one, that they are just not going to allow Californians to use it. However, the main ones to watch out for are the big main distributions. And the big main distributions are Debian, Arch, SUSE, Fedora. We know Fedora is planning compliance. Arch Linux has, insofar, had no public comment from the Arch team. So we don't know where they're going, and conversations regarding this have been deleted from the Arch Linux forums, which is not a good look in my view. Although they may simply be wanting to avoid massive heated arguments. Debian has also not said what they're planning, and it's hard to say which way Debian would go. They are very much an open source focused crowd. So they might refuse simply on that grounds. They might also go along with it because Debian is essential to internet infrastructure. Basically, whichever way Debian, Arch, Fedora, and SUSE go will influence every distribution derived from them, as most Linux distributions are just forks of these main distributions. SUSE is unlikely to comply, as they are primarily European focused. They don't really give a shit about what's going on in the USA. It's not their problem. It is highly unlikely we'll see anything kernel level for Linux, because the Linux kernel, the Linux team is all maintained in Europe, and they are unlikely to involve themselves in something like this. Arch is Canadian, so while they are outside the USA, they are much more heavily exposed to the potentiality of this spreading to Canada. Debian, I can't remember where Debian's from, but we don't know what they're planning. Overall, this is a serious problem. It would require massive changes to how Linux works on a day-to-day basis. Obviously, we don't have a clear idea of how compliance would be achieved in Linux, but whatever was done would likely cause a lot of problems, as currently Linux user accounts are handled entirely locally. Would this be a simple, yes, I am over 18 toggle, or would this be a thing that you have to get externally verified? How would you do that for every distribution? Fundamentally, it's a shitty idea concocted by people who have limited knowledge and understanding of the technology ecosystem that powers the modern world. I imagine Microsoft are absolutely ecstatic, as there is the high possibility of with Linux being made illegal in these areas, which would leave them the only possible option. Just when Microsoft is absolutely shitting the bed with its vibe coding and Indians. Oh, God, what are we doing? Why? Why, Microsoft? Is this your fault? But no, for the most part, one variation of this law seems to be more about companies like Facebook wanting to offload legal liability that they are currently responsible for onto someone else. Facebook takes a lot of fines over things relating to children. And it would be great for them if they could offload that responsibility onto someone else. Will that work? Who knows? Who knows? Overall, though, this is technically unfeasible and will likely not work out. Deaf to Windows. I use Arch, by the way. I had to say it. I had to say it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But that has been the Dumpster Dive. That has been the Dumpster Dive. The first episode of Dumpster Dive concocted in about half an hour of work and an hour of research. We might be doing this again in the future. At the very least, I want to do this as a weekly thing. I hope you will join us for future episodes of the Dumpster Dive. And if you have any stories, any leads, by all means, please do come to the Digby Code, which will be linked down below in the video description, and share your stories. We also stream on Twitch. I play video games. Until next time, keep your heads down, and remember to drink water.